So Akriti will tell us when we're rolling.
Okay.
I know today's a whirlwind for you. So
No, it's great though. I'm so excited.
When you get your needs met, other people will be inconvenienced. And then we start saying other random shit we don't even believe.
Yeah.
If you don't get off the couch, I'm not giving you
No ice
dessert
cream.
tonight.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
and then it comes at night and you're like, well, sorbet isn't ice cream, right? Like
Gelato. We can make an exception.
Gelato. It's milk-based, not cream-based, and so it's totally fine.
I feel such shame, like it shouldn't feel this hard. But it does.
Those moments are normal. None of those thoughts make you a good or bad parent. I don't want my kids to ever say, my mom loved me so much she ran herself into the ground.
Well, Dr. Becky, our Mom Life Crisis series focuses less on kids and more on moms getting really vulnerable and real about how hard this is. But it still feels a bit taboo for women to admit that. Why do you think that is?
I mean, there's so many things. First of all, I'm just gonna latch onto a word you said because it's actually something I think a lot about, where even when you say, why is it hard for us to admit that? There's shame in the word admit, right? I always think admit can be like upgraded to share. It's hard for us to share about how hard motherhood is, right? And I think it has to do with so many different things, but if I go way back, I think this whole idea of maternal instinct has had a really pervasive impact on how we think about motherhood. And I'm someone who likes to hold multiple things at once. So I think multiple things can be true. I'm not saying there's no part of motherhood that's instinctual. We have these moments where we just know, we have a gut. And there's moments we know, and there's definitely moments we don't know. And my friends, let's say a friend who's a surgeon, I believe she has some surgical instinct, like something brought her there. She's really, really good with the detail and fine motor. And I can never imagine her saying, Becky, I have a surgical instinct, so I'm not going to med school, and like, I'm not gonna have a residency, but there's someone I follow on Instagram, and I have some great reels, and that's how I do surgery. I mean, first of all, that would be illegal. Mm-hmm. Second of all, I don't know if you or I would ever go to that doctor. The interesting thing is, you and I would both want to go to the doctor who went to a med school, preferably a really good one, right? Had a really good residency. And I'd want to go to the doctor who would say to me, by the way, I'm also in this group and we talk about it all the time and I'm still learning and I do even more continuing ed than I have to. And I'd say, I want to go to you. So there's an area where someone is doing a very hard, very important job. And we think that they're investing in education and resources and ongoing support is a sign of how good they are, is a sign of their growth. And yet with parenthood, we're told it should come naturally. You should be able to figure out on your own. People have been doing this for generations, all these things. And so there's something implied, and it's not said, but I'm gonna say it because if you can name it, it takes away some of the power. What's implied is, so if you're having a moment or a stage that's hard, it's your fault. Something's broken in you, right? And if we as women think that hard parenting moments is a sign that something's wrong or broken with us, we're gonna stay silent, we're gonna stay small, we're gonna feel shame, we're gonna feel stuck. I think more than almost anything else, the narrative I wanna change in the world isn't even limited to how we parent our kids. There's different approaches and I have a lot of feelings about that, but what I maybe have an even stronger feeling about changing is I want moms to say, this is hard, and that's a sign that I deserve more, that I need help, and that it's okay to put my hand up and say, hey, I need some help with this. And that's actually a sign of my strength, not of my weakness.
I always get emotional with this because I have one of those deeply feeling kids that you talk about, and I'm often full of negativity and so angry.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the word shame because I feel such shame, like it shouldn't feel this hard. But it does.
Yeah.
And so I just appreciate you reframing it that way because I do think it's so important to do so.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think my deeply feeling kid who's now 10, you know, she'll call herself, she goes, I'm the OG DFK, you know, and I was like, you are, and then she'll say, you know, I started your company, so you're welcome. I was like, well, you know, you actually kind of did, because my oldest, I had hard moments, but there was something a little bit more linear. And at that time in my private practice, I'd have parents. It would have been someone like you who was like, Dr. Becky, I swear I'm doing the things you tell me to do, but my kid is not reacting well. In fact, it makes things worse. And it makes my kid scream. And honestly, in the back of my head, I would think, like, you're probably doing it wrong. You know, like, I wouldn't say that to their face, but I would think it.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, okay, well, let's creatively problem solve. And then I had my second kid. And I was like, can I curse on the show?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, holy shit. You know, I was like, holy shit. And then I had all of these people come to mind. I was like, I feel like I have to call all of them. And they probably felt some hidden judgment from me. And they were right. And I was like, oh, I have, no. Everything you said. My kid hisses, growls, screams, get out of my room. But I actually know they don't want me to get out of their room because it's not like a calm get out of my room. It's like I'm about to destroy the world and wreak havoc on everything, and I can't make good decisions for myself, and I feel a little scared of you even though you're 3. And there's a part of me that was very loud in the beginning that was saying, something's wrong with my kid or something's wrong with me. It's probably both. And I think that if we're faced with something so confusing, and it is confusing, I don't know about you, but in high school or college, I wasn't given a course on how to understand children who go 0 to 60, how to understand children whose shame sits next to their vulnerability. Okay, so I don't have any shame about not understanding rocket science. I'm just like, yeah, I'm not a rocket scientist, so like, don't understand that. I have no shame about not being able to speak Mandarin. I've never, you know, I don't. I can't do it. And if I really wanted to learn Mandarin, I would probably sign up for like Duolingo or something and commit myself and know it was a whole journey. But there's something about our kids, and I do think it's moms more than dads, where there's this just assumption, I should know better. And then what you said, it should be easier. And I think that's true for no kids. I do agree with you that these deeply feeling kids, it is definitely not true for, especially if, ironically, we were a kid where our big emotions were shut down in our childhood. Then what we're confronted with when we have a kid whose full emotions are on full display, I mean, we don't understand them. We are triggered based on our past, and not understanding our kid and having our own triggers and putting those two things together, yeah, that's a hard situation.
Well, and one of the other things you mentioned that gave me such pause and is so interesting to me is that we live in this culture of convenience. So we're used to things going our way, so when they don't, and I'm talking like 100 times a day, we almost don't know how to process.
I mean, that the word inconvenience, me and my friends always joke that if we were told one word would describe parenting a younger child, you know, you're told like joy and love like you've ever had, I'd be like, I feel like the realistic word would be inconvenient. Like I'm just trying to get yogurt at the grocery store and my kid's having a meltdown and now I can't even get the yogurt to come back. Like no part of me thought my Saturday morning was gonna go that way, or I have a work trip and I'm so excited to see my kid. But when I have 5 minutes with them before bedtime, they're so angry about the work trip, and the anger only comes out when I have the reunion. And so instead of having this nice moment together, they're screaming at me. I'm like, this is also not how I thought I was gonna spend 8:35 p.m. on a Tuesday night. You know, it's just inconvenient, right? And it is inconvenient. And I think the thing that's harder about parenting in 2025 than decades in the past is that our bodies, like as parents, we are accustomed to so much more convenience than our parents had. Like, I think back to my parents parenting me, and if they really were like, I'm just done with Becky, I can't deal, like what would they have done? They would have had to like open up the New York Times and like read, or like maybe I guess put on a TV program. Like it almost was hard to be distracted all the time.
Right.
For me and you're like, oh, I can scroll on the gram, I could order something I don't even need on you know, Instagram or Amazon, I could read an email I don't even care about but pretend it's important. Like whatever, it's so easy to have a life of more convenience. And our kids do, right? Where if I wanted to watch a movie as a kid, I don't know about if they have this here, but we had Blockbuster. It was like this whole thing. I had to get someone to drive me, and did they have it? It took hours. My kids want to watch a movie, it's like watch, play. The gap between wanting and having is like this. So our lives are more convenient, which means our tolerance of frustration and inconvenience is lower than ever. our kids' life from the start and how they're circuiting their body is more convenient. Their tolerance of inconvenience and frustration is lower than ever. And if you put that together, that is going to mean more tantrums, more acting out behavior, because we actually have to work harder to be present and to actually teach our kids the skills that they need for life.
I'm glad you mentioned older generations, because I'm struck by the fact that for many of us, we are surrounded by loving, well-intentioned older friends and family members who were perhaps raised with more of a fear-based parenting approach. And those moments of parenting can be incredibly awkward when you are trying to validate your child's feelings, but you can feel eyes burning a hole in the back of your head. Do you have any advice for how to deal with those moments?
They're so hard,
Yeah.
right? And you know, one of the things you said where you're intervening with your kid and you can kind of feel these eyes behind you, I think it speaks to something in a very zoomed out way where a lot of us, and especially us women, we're almost trained to get really good at noticing other people, noticing other people's emotions, noticing other people's potential judgment and acting in a way to avoid that judgment. So it's kind of this interesting thing where if we say to ourselves, am I someone who can notice eyes on me from behind? Like, it's actually literally not possible to notice that, right?
Right.
And at the same time, it's probably true because you've developed your own senses in your environment in a way where you do get hypervigilant and so expert on what everyone else may or may not be thinking about you. So I actually think step one, in terms of a piece of advice, is just noticing that. And I'd actually say maybe 1A or 1B would be kind of appreciating that that must have really helped you in your earlier years. Almost like a gratitude of, wow, I'm so attentive to what everyone around me might be thinking or might be judging about my behavior. There's no way as a baby I was born that way. I just don't imagine a 3-week-old saying, oh, should I call out for milk again? Like, are people gonna think I'm too much? And I don't know, is my parent, no, they just scream.
Right.
They're just so embodied with what they want. And so to have the gratitude of that must have served me for a while. And it probably works a little bit more against me than for me now. And so let me just notice that pattern. Because I think so much advice there is, well, what do I say to my parent? Or what do I say to my aunt? The truth is, the best advice is, what do I say to myself? Because the more energy we put into convincing other people about our ways and our boundaries, the weaker our own ways and our own boundaries become. Because boundaries are about yourself, right? And so we're kind of going about it in this outside-in way, which is never productive. And I think in terms of what you need to say to yourself is, very practically, let's say you're going to your mother-in-law's house and you're like, oh, my mother-in-law loves to say things like, oh, these gentle ways these days, or your son's gonna end up in a prison, like these really messed up things, by the way. But your power actually won't come back from saying something to your mother-in-law. Your power comes from looking in the mirror before and saying something like, I'm the leader of this house. A pilot does not ask passenger permission to land in a certain airport. I mean, can you imagine?
No.
Are you guys okay? I think we need to make an emergency landing. Do you want to take a vote?
Yes, get me off this
You're like,
plane.
why are you asking me?
Yes.
And even if we said no, I hope you don't change your mind. Like, you're the one who's supposed to know what you're doing,
Yes.
right? So same thing. I'm the leader of my family. I am the pilot of this plane. I am still figuring out my parenting approach. That's okay. I don't need anyone's approval today. And I promise you, if you give yourself a little bit of that pep talk in the mirror, I bet your gaze is going to be more directed inward and less directed outward.
I think of you often, even though we just met. I think of you often when I'm sitting in my son's bedroom when he's having a moment and the door is closed and I'm trying to be that steady pilot, even though I feel so turbulent inside.
Yes.
And I think about boundaries, and all of your work around boundaries has been so important to me. And yet when I hear boundaries, I also feel exhausted.
Yeah.
Because there are so many times in a day where holding a boundary feels too hard. And I'm wondering, do you have any compassion for the moments where it's just impossible to hold a boundary again and again? Like, you're trying, but you just can't because in that moment you don't have it in you.
I mean, not only do I have compassion, I would say I have personal experience for those moments, you know? So, I mean, I'm a I'm a completely imperfect parent. These things are all ideas. They're things I try to do, and probably I don't say enough. I'm actually really not a perfectionist. Anyone who knows me well would definitely say that about me. Like, I think I almost went on live TV with like lettuce all over my mouth, and I wouldn't have even noticed, like, you know, even after the fact, or really cared. And so all these ideas I put out there, I know inherently, I don't even hold myself to that standard, but I should say it more often because that's not clear to everyone else. And so when it comes to boundaries, without a doubt, there are moments with my own kids where it's like TV time is over. Forget it. TV time's not really over or whatever. Like, watch as much TV as you want, right? Or, okay, it's really important to have bedtime because you have a soccer game tomorrow or because it's been late. Suddenly half an hour passed by and I'm reading you your 37th book or, you know, whatever it is. So that definitely happens in my house. You know, there's this interesting thing with boundaries. Number one, I think most people don't have the definition correct. And if you don't have a definition correct, you can't kind of do something well because the whole thing isn't starting from a sturdy place. So I want to talk about what a boundary is. But I think there's this other thing I want to get to also where there's this duality. Like, do I set a boundary now, which can be short-term hard, and I give myself kind of more long-term groundedness and freedom? Or do I not set a boundary now, knowing I'm going to be building up resentment and reactivity? And, you know, those are often the choices. So boundaries, what are they? I just hear from people all the time when it comes to parenting, when it comes to work, when it comes to someone's adult, you know, friendships. These people, no one respects my boundaries. I set boundaries and people don't respect my boundaries. And whenever I hear that, I almost always think, I wonder if you have a definition of boundaries that's different than my definition of boundaries, because respect for my boundaries just would never be something I said. So my definition of boundaries is a boundary is something you tell someone you will do, and it requires the other person to do nothing, which is why someone respecting my boundaries isn't even really a thing, because my boundary is what I'm going to do, and it would require the other person to do nothing. So with the example of my child, let's say my kid's jumping on the couch. People think they're setting boundaries when they say, I need you to get off the couch. Charlie, I need you to get off the couch. And I laugh because I used to do it too, but now looking back, it's so humorous. We do this weird thing as
The
parents.
tone too.
Well, we start counting. It's like
I do that. I did it this morning multiple times. 5.
Right, I'm gonna count
4.
to 5.
Yeah.
Like, I just imagine like the CEO of like a great company being like, I need you to stop interrupting me. I'm gonna count to 5. Like, it's kind of so weak. Like, you're letting the other person do the thing that's gonna frustrate you, and then you're letting yourself get frustrated and yell at them.
Right.
Like, you see, we know how it's gonna play out.
Right.
You know. So, but I used to do too. Okay, I'm gonna count to 5, and then we start saying other random shit. We don't even. If you don't get off the couch, I'm not giving you
no ice
dessert
cream
tonight.
Yep.
No, and then it comes at night, and you're like, well, sorbet isn't ice cream, right? Like,
gelato. We can make an exception.
Gelato. It's milk-based, not cream-based, and so it's totally fine. And then we undermine our own authority, and again,
and feel guilty about it.
And feel guilty. The whole thing.
Yes.
And then we say, my kid doesn't respect my boundaries. It's so hard to set boundaries. So in that situation, this is a boundary. Charlie, it's looking like it's hard for you to get off the couch. I'm gonna walk over there, and if by the time I get there, you're not off the couch, I will put my arms around you and put you on the floor because you're jumping right near our glass table. It's just not safe, whatever the reasoning is, right? Similar in adult relationships. My mother-in-law always stops over and comes in unannounced. I'm making that up, but you know, that doesn't happen to me, but I know a lot of people that literally happens to. No, again, often we want to try to just form a relationship and, hey, this is what works for us, what's going on, you want to see the grandkids, I understand. But let's say that doesn't work and you really did need to set some boundary. The only version of a boundary you could set is, look, this is awkward, but I have to say it. You're stopping over unannounced. It's just not working for our family. And we've talked about different things, that's not working. The next time you come over, I will come out. I will come to your car, and I'm not going to let you in, and we'll find a different time to visit. And I'm hoping it doesn't get there. But having alone time with the family on Sunday night is so important. And so that is something I will do. This is what gives me my power back, because in both situations, now I should be clear, when I go over to my kid and take them off the couch, this is really important. My kid in my home would never be like, I really needed that boundary. Thank you, Mom. Like, you're such a sturdy pilot. I really appreciate you. This is really good for me later in life. No, they scream. And if I did have to say that to my mother-in-law, again, that would be many steps away from how I'd begin. Again, they're not going to say, oh, look at you. You're so strong. No. When you set a boundary, people get upset. That's always true, because people inherently like to do what they want to do, and no one likes having their desires thwarted at any age. So once you set a boundary, you have to anticipate someone's protest. But here's something that could really change the game for you.
Yeah.
I said this to a parent and it really resonated after. I said, what if you started seeing your kids protest as your win? And they were like, what kind of sick human being are you? And I was like, it is kind of sick, but stay with me, okay?
Yeah.
Because boundaries are hard for you. But if you knew that your kids being upset, no, I want to jump on the couch, right, is the sign that you set a true boundary, then you might have a very different reaction, right? Where I wouldn't like do jumping up and down dance and like,
Right.
you know, but if you said to yourself, this is exactly what's supposed to happen. Oh, I'm doing this exactly right. I guess I set a true boundary. Look at me, you know, and you had somewhere to like report that win after and people cheered you on. And then you knew my job after setting a boundary is my kid's gonna be upset. And now my job is to kind of validate what's going on. Oh, it's no fun to jump on the floor. You wish you could jump on the couch. I totally get it. While blocking my kid, because if your kid's like my kid, as soon as I say that, they think that means I'm gonna like let them get
Yeah.
back on the couch. No, 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 that's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
Where there's this wash, rinse, repeat. You set a true boundary, the other person gets upset, you can validate that they're upset while you continue holding your boundary, right? And if you're able to say to yourself, this is the sign I set a boundary, I promise you your reaction is gonna be less exhausting, because what feels exhausting about setting boundaries is our unconscious belief that it's our job to make other people happy with us. And that actually goes back to the eyes on the back of our head,
Yes.
being hypervigilant, right?
I'm curious about your take on setting boundaries within partnerships when you're raising kids, because one of the topics that came up again and again when I was interviewing women for this series was the unequal distribution of the mental load.
Yes.
And that being such a weight on mothers' shoulders in particular.
I mean, such a weight.
Where do we start here?
Yes, and Eve Rodsky, who writes about this, is like a dear, dear friend of mine, and it inspires me so greatly. So, you know, one of the things Eve and I have talked a lot about is kind of the nuances of how a lot of moms understand mental load now. We didn't used to.
Yep.
You know, we didn't generations ago. Like, yes, maybe it is like my partner takes my kid to soccer, but I was the one who researched the leagues, and I was the one who was like, oh my goodness, 10 a.m. Thursday, if I don't sign up in the first 15 seconds, my kid's
like
not
Hunger
gonna.
Games.
Oh my goodness, it's such craziness. And I had to figure out, oh, the cleats don't fit from last year. And then my partner's like, but I took them. And you're like, oh my goodness, I am so enraged,
Yes.
right? And they're like, why are you so mad, right? And like the
Yes.
whole thing, 100%. But then the thing Eve and I always talk about is the way we go about talking to a partner about mental load really matters. Because I know for me, I read her book and I did everything she said not to do. I went to my husband, I was like, you have to read this book. You have to read this book. You've been doing all the bad things Eve said. I have proof, it's in a book, and then you tell me how you're gonna fix it. And it's not like I was wrong. But I used to always, you know, tell couples and, you know, my private practice, and even now, like, you can be right or you can be effective. You can rarely be both, right? And there are many true ways to express yourself. That was one true way, but there are other ways. And we have to approach our partner, or we'd want them to approach us with something that's a hard topic, like we're on the same team. As soon as you approach someone like you're on a different team, everybody gets defensive, and that's just not effective. So I think the conversation about the mental load is so important and so real. And one of the ways I know Eve and I even love working with each other is, okay, that's a system to help people feel understood, and it's a system for how to move forward. And I think one of the things I love helping parents with is how do we communicate in a way to actually get our needs met, right? And I think that actually starts with a very different approach, right? Which is, hey, let's say it's to a partner. You and I are on the same team. And one of the things I've realized is there's tasks that need to get done. And there's the needing to get done, and then there's the kind of thinking and planning before they get done. And I actually think it's a lot of the thinking and planning that makes me feel stressed and overwhelmed. If I'm honest, it sometimes makes me feel disconnected, kind of distant from you, and you might not even realize, but that's one of the reasons maybe we haven't been as close. And it's something I'd love to talk about, because I think talking about it, understanding it, maybe even like a redistribution in some way, I think it would be better for me. I think it could be better for you. I definitely think it could be better for our marriage. Are you open to that? And now all of a sudden, you know, you're approaching someone in a way where they feel like you're a teammate and not an enemy. And I think we're all a little more open to a conversation in that way.
That sounds so healthy.
I
I'm
mean-
going to try for it.
Yes. I think also these are things where when you want to have any conversation, I often say things that I don't think people take literally enough. Like, that's a hard conversation. If that was me, I would write it down. I'd practice it. I really would. I'd probably say it into a voice note and play it back to myself. I'd be like, the words sound like a same team, but my tone, not so much, you know? And then I might even say to my partner, hey, I wrote something down because it is an emotional topic and I want to show up in the best way I can. It's a little awkward. I am going to read it. I just feel like it's going to be most productive. So here we go. And then if someone said to me, but Becky, you would really do that? I'd be like, no, I would literally do that. Right? And I think we put in time and intentionality in a lot of places in our life. Like if you had a really hard conversation with your boss about wanting a raise, you might say, this is hard for me, I wrote it down. Or you might say in a presentation, I know a lot of people ad-lib this, that's not really for me, I have some notes.
Yeah.
And you would do that in the workplace. But most people I know do care about their partnerships more than work. But again, we're not taught that this is just something that deserves time and attention and intentionality, right? And so I think that's totally okay to have kind of a Cliff Notes with you.
That's such a great point and such a practical tool.
Yeah.
You recently gave a talk to a college class that I was really struck by. And you talked about resilience and how being resilient doesn't feel resilient at all. It feels messy. And when I watched that talk, I wondered, like, do you think this is one of the reasons that parenting feels so hard because you're always in a space of not knowing, you're never ever getting to a finish line?
Yes. And, you know, one of the things some people I've met through this whole journey I've been on, and I've met some people who are these amazing thought leaders, and one of the things we all have in common is people think that the things we talk about a lot are things we're really expert at. They're just the things we're working through ourselves, like very, very publicly. And so resilience around struggling, and what I talk about in that class, and it's one of my favorite concepts in my, like I even have this whole frustration tolerance and building resilience workshop. I think it's one of the most important skills we teach our kids. But I always say to parents, like, if you're teaching your kids, well, who's teaching you? And I'm so honored so many parents let me do that. Is this idea of the learning space. And the learning space is kind of, you can almost imagine it as this space between not knowing and knowing. And this applies to everything. It could be your kid doesn't know how to read, and then one day they do know how to read. They don't know how to do a puzzle, they figured out how to do that puzzle. Not knowing how to handle a deeply feeling kid. And over here, this is the other thing, is this elusive, oh, I know how to handle it. Between you and I, this point never comes.
Never.
Never comes. That's
Okay.
right. But again, there is something almost sad, I think, about a parent saying, I fully understand every aspect of my child, or even of myself. I really do find that sad. Like, well, what now? Like,
Right.
I find, and so the space between not knowing and knowing anything, I call the learning space. And I think the learning space can have a couple feelings, but basically has one feeling associated with it, frustration. And now, more than ever, when our body feels frustrated, the voice that pops up most loudly, whether it's frustration in learning how to read, doing a project at work, doing a puzzle, figuring out something with your kid, when we're frustrated, our loudest voice says, I can't do it, I quit, something's wrong with me, something's wrong with my kid, right? We have all of these really, really negative self-beliefs. But I think what the learning space idea really gives people is it allows them to say, wait, like, this is just a map. Like, I'm just in the learning space. And when I'm in the learning space, I'm supposed to feel frustrated. So not the most pleasant feeling, but I'm feeling this right. And I think when you can say those words to yourself about anything, I'm frustrated. I'm feeling this right. This is how learning feels. This is how this part of my journey feels. It could be a work project. This is really hard and I can't do it. Whoa, I'm in the learning space. My boss gave me this project because they believe in me, which also means they believe I'm someone who can figure out something messy. I'm feeling this right. I can keep going, right? That applies to reading, to adulthood, to parenting, to marriage, to starting a company, to everything. And I think what it really brings up, and this is what I think we really give parents, is our hardest moments aren't when something kind of really bad is happening with our kid. We think our kid's behavior is the problem. Their tantrums, their sleep issues, the sibling arguments. I think the thing that gives us pain is actually just a lack of clarity. Because when you understand what's happening and when you understand what your role is, everything starts to feel better. And I think that's really, really powerful, because as parents, too often we're saying, what do I do to fix my kid's behavior? Instead of how can I better understand my kid's behavior and my reaction to it? And if you picture that learning space and you say, yes, that's where I am, it feels relieving and just, yeah, a lot less heavy.
I firmly believe that we prepare for all the wrong things when it comes to parenting. I did the prenatal classes and I learned how to swaddle and identify a fever. And these are two things I could Google and
Yes.
most people could.
Yes.
What's one thing you wish expectant parents knew?
This is such a good question, and it brings me to this term I've been thinking a lot about and haven't really talked about too much publicly, but I'll share it here, where I want to create what I call like an emotional registry for parents.
Yes.
Because I think everything in a physical registry, it's just binding our anxiety, but like the bottle you have or the swaddles, like you and I know now, like it actually just
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And I think the emotional registry would have 3 components. What you need to learn about yourself. If you're raising your kid with someone, the conversations you need to have with your partner, and what's kind of critical to know about the early stages of having a baby, which is basically that babies are pretty boring and you're gonna have a whole range of emotions about it, only some of which are pleasant, right? But if I had to pick one, right, I wanna kind of create that whole thing. So I'm putting that out there, manifesting it.
Yeah.
I think the number one thing I would say to someone having a baby is just that, like, you're going to have the entire range of emotions after you have this baby. There's gonna be moments where you feel happy. There's gonna be moments where you feel like this is the best thing that happened to me. There's gonna be moments when you say, I can't believe I did this. There's gonna be moments when you say, I'm not equipped to be a parent. There's gonna be moments when you say, I miss the hell out of my pre-baby life. All of those moments are normal. All of those moments are allowed. None of those thoughts make you a good or bad parent. And I think it brings up this bigger thing where we have feelings and thoughts, and then we have reactions to our feelings and thoughts. And what gives us distress isn't usually the feeling or the thought. It's the reaction to the feeling and the thought. Because we say, oh, good moms don't say that. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm an awful person, I'm a monster. But if you could preload a parent with, you know, I'm feeling upset right now, or I'm feeling like I'm missing my pre-baby life. Well, that makes sense. I had a lot of freedom, and it makes sense that I'd miss mornings when I could sleep in and nobody cared. And I'm allowed to feel that way. I call that kind of AVP, acknowledge a feeling, validate the feeling, and permit the feeling. If I could give parents kind of the ability to AVP the range of feelings, I think that's what I would wish all new parents.
So many women lose themselves when they become moms. And I'm wondering what mechanisms you've put in place for yourself so that you don't lose yourself in this period of time.
You can't end on my favorite. This could be like the whole thing. And I don't even know if you know this, but we're days away from this kind of day we named it, Good Inside. You know, this is Women's History Month, and we're talking a lot about it and looking at all these women for all they give, you know, and that's amazing, all their accomplishments, all they've given the world. But we were just talking internally about how women in general are valued for what they give. And what about a day? I'm all for more than a day, but we're like, what about a day where we celebrate women for what they take? And what we're calling it is Inconvenient Women Day.
Huh.
And we're talking a lot about what does it mean to be an inconvenient woman. And the truth is, the goal isn't just to be inconvenient. Like, I'm not recommending you just go around like elbowing people or, you know, causing traffic. But I think there's this truth that we're not taught, which is when you get your needs met, other people will be inconvenienced. Like, I feel like we all have this fantasy. Like, I'm gonna say to my husband, look, you've been sleeping in on Saturdays and Sundays for 10 years. And I would like to sleep in one day. Mm-hmm. And like, we have this fantasy that our husband is gonna say, so proud of you. You deserve it. You deserve it. Take both days. Like, and instead, we often get this. Oh, I had a long week at work. I'm going to be so tired. And then what we do is we use someone else's inconvenience as kind of a justification for not getting our needs met. And then we don't get our needs met. We say, okay, forget it. I'll just do it next weekend. And then we feel resentful. Then we have rage. And then inevitably we're apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry I yelled. But kind of in the back of our head, we're like, why the fuck am I apologizing to you? I haven't slept in 10 years.
Yes.
Right?
And next weekend never comes.
That's right. Because the whole thing is wash, rinse, repeat in a bad direction. Someone once said to me, a Good Inside member, I'll never forget, she goes, I don't think you care about kids. And I was like, whoa, girl, like, what is that? And she goes, I think you get our attention through our kids, and what you really care about is empowering women. And I said, have you not been here long enough? Cannot two things be true? It's like, and I do care about kids, and I care about men and I care about women. But I do think maybe our secret mission at Good Inside is just to help caregivers, and maybe it is, especially moms, kind of reclaim their power. And not power, meaning yelling at your kids and sending them to their room and causing destruction, but like the true power that comes from gazing in and noticing what your needs are, learning that, maybe relearning it because we've lost access, and then having kind of an increasing ability to both bring those out into the world, have your needs met, and yes, tolerate the inconvenience to others that come along with it. So what mechanisms do I have for that in my life? I think I'm definitely a reformed people pleaser. So I would want to let everyone know I wasn't born in this way, right? I mean, even my anorexia as a teen was kind of a way of saying, I don't need anything. That's what anorexia is. I have no desire. I don't even desire food. I'll just waste away and take up no space. And let's just say I think I might have overcorrected for that. So I feel pretty proud of my journey. But here's a couple things I do. Number one, speak up early and often. When I feel like I have a need in my marriage or a need to be with girlfriends, I think the common thing we say to ourselves is it's not a big deal. It's kind of selfish, right? But I am inspired by pilots. And I do often think about a pilot saying, you guys, I've flown for 30 straight days. I just love piloting you all and I haven't even slept. And we'd be like, I'm getting off this plane. And interestingly enough, there's laws that make sure that, there's literally laws that make sure pilots have self-care. So I used to say to myself when this was new, it's a law. That's what I'd say. It's a law. I'm saying to my husband, I need to sleep in. In my head, I would just be like, it's a law. I need to sleep in. And that would really help me, right? So speaking up early, and even if the narrative is this isn't even a big deal, you have to speak up when it's not a big deal so you don't end up exploding after it's a big deal. So that's number one. Number two, I do think checking in about these burners of our life matters. I think for me, I have 5 main burners of my life. There's work, there's kind of myself, there's my marriage, there's my kids, and there's my friends, right? And we never have all burners going at the same time. There's no balance, but every once in a while I just say what burner's been extra high, what burner's been low, and can I just turn one of the low burners up a little bit, right? And I think that's one of the things that helps. The other thing I have in my life that's a really big deal is every single Thursday morning, I work out with my 4 best girlfriends. And they're amazing because they come to my side of New York City because they know I'm, working so much.
Which I've heard is no small feat.
Is no small feat. It is no small feat, okay? And we do this kind of dance class that's, I don't even know if it's a workout, but it's very fun and we kind of dance and it is a workout. I hear my instructor being like, Becky! And it is. And then on a lot of days, we also just have breakfast after. We'll just, make eggs together in one of our apartments and I go into work a little bit late. And I have to be honest, it used to be every Thursday. Maybe now it's 2 to 3 Thursdays a month. That is so, so important. And so those are 3 things that come to mind to make sure, I don't think losing ourselves is good for everyone. I don't want my kids to ever say, my mom loved me so much, she ran herself into the ground. It's just not the model of motherhood I want to pass down to my kids.
Well, this has been thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This has been awesome.